Hello. Hi, everyone. Am I audible? Could people online confirm if I'm audible?
Yeah, you're audible.
Yes, thank you. So, welcome, everyone. This is the first talk in the Young Achievers Symposium as part of the CSRI initiative to bring about speakers who are working on AI for social good. Today, we have Šimon Schierreich. He is a doctoral student in the Department of Theoretical Computer Science in the Faculty of Information Technology at Czech Technical University in Prague. He basically works on problems in computational social choice, algorithmic game theory, and collective decision making. His main interest is in algorithmic complexity, which is finding restrictions on these problems that make them computationally tractable. For the last 6 months, he's been a visiting scholar in the FAIR lab at IST. And apart from his research interests, he's an amazing cook, a dedicated scout camp instructor, and you might find him in a couple of films and TV shows about German football players. So I'll hand it over to Šimon, and he'll walk you through algorithms for refugee resettlement. There you go.
Thank you for the nice introduction, and welcome everyone. This should be a symposium about AI for social good. Basically, I am not working that much on AI, but more on theory side, as you heard, theoretical computer science and like complexity and algorithmic foundations for these models that are then used in practice by practitioners of AI for social good. So I hope that still my talk will be valuable. Okay. The talk is basically about refugee resettlement and theoretical models that are used as foundations for artificial intelligence model that helps with refugee resettlement. So let me first show you how is the situation with refugees nowadays. These are data from 2023. The newest column is from 2023, and we can see that almost 120 millions of refugees are now under mandate of this United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. And this number is increasing quite drastically every year. Okay? So from 2021 to 2022, we can see a very big increase, which is caused mostly by Russian war against Ukraine. But even 22 to 23, there is an increase of roughly 10 million refugees. By these labels on the right side, there are different categories of refugees. Some people are called internally displaced people, refugees, asylum seekers. For the purpose of this talk, I will use refugees only, not distinguishing between these categories. These numbers come with some context, which is important for this talk. So 73% of refugees in 2023 originated from just 5 countries. 69% of them were hosted in neighboring countries to the countries of origin. And 75% of refugees are hosted in low and middle income countries. So refugees are someone hosted not very evenly between countries of the world, are concentrated in countries which are low and middle income and have many problems on their own. So refugees are quite a big burden for them. So what are the causes for forced displacement? Of course, some wars and political and conflicts and violence are what probably all of you can think of. People are forced to leave their countries also because of some political opinions or religion opinions and beliefs. And also quite large of people are leaving their countries because of climate change and natural disasters. This is how we are successful or good in solving problems with refugees. So in 2023, we were able to, to return 6.1 million forcibly displaced persons to places where they originally lived. This is quite a huge number, but still even 6.1 million returned, but the increase from year to year was almost 10 million. Almost 160,000 of refugees were resettled to new countries or new places, new areas, and 32,000 received new citizenship in a country where they were temporarily assigned. In social sciences literature, there are 4 basic solution concepts, basically, for refugee situation and for displacement. First is prevention. This is a quote from some internal research paper by United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, which clearly states that prevention, which means that you want to somehow stop and prevent causes of forced displacement to appear, that it's not very clear how to define something like prevention. It's not clear how to do this in practice because if there is some, let's say, armed conflict in some country, probably some non-government organizations cannot be very helpful in this. Even less I see an impact of some algorithmic solutions for resolving such conflict, right? But I also mentioned that there are some causes like climate change and natural disasters. So I think there is space for use of AI, at least for predicting such causes. And there are at least 2 projects which may be interesting for some of you. One is called Climate Change AI, which is an initiative that really trying to focus on how to tackle climate change with AI tools. And different initiative is AI for drought. They are basically trying to predict drought through the whole world. Okay. Repatriation is another tool, but we can repatriate some persons only if the original cause of forced displacement is resolved, which is basically as hard as preventing these causes to appear, right? Conflicts and other reasons for displacement can last for decades, maybe even more. So there is also not much space how algorithms and AI can be useful, but maybe something will appear in future or close future. Maybe just my imagination is limited. Resettlement is another tool, and in resettlement, actually, AI and algorithms can be very helpful. So I showed you these numbers where refugees are located in neighboring countries, low and middle income countries, and so on, right? So the idea here is to somehow spread the refugees into some other countries than are the most effective ones, right? So we do some redistribution of refugees between different communities. The theoretical model for refugee resettlement is usually called double-site matching market. And it works like follows. So we have a set of locations with some requirements. Requirements can be like number of persons this location can accept, or does this location requires, I don't know, college-educated refugees, whatever you can think of. On the other side, we have refugees with some properties, right? So you can have like family set, or you can have, is anyone in this group college-educated, whatever. And the goal is to find matching between refugees and locations so that no constraints of locations are broken. There are many works in this area, many very interesting work. And what is the most impressive is that results, both algorithmic and machine learning and AI results from this area are actually used in practice. There is this software called Anymore, which is used by this US resettlement agency. So for matching refugees between different communities or different cities, they actually use these models, which is, I think, very, very interesting. If you want to hear more about this, then go to refugees.ai, or you can watch a very nice video from ICHKAI 2023, which was keynote talk about this software and this research from Alex Teitelbaum from Refugees AI group. So very, very nice and interesting lecture. And there is also some crossroad for many papers written by this group and crossroad for all research related to refugee resettlement, basically. I recommend it. The last part, the last tool, basically, we have available for refugee resettlement is integration. So once some refugees were allocated to our community, our city, we need to integrate them. The newcomers have two most immediate needs, right? They need to live somewhere, so they need housing, and they need to work somewhere to have some money. So they need employment. Employment is already considered in resettlement algorithms from previous slides. They use employment as a measure of successfulness of their resettlement. So it is somehow taken into consideration. So we focus only on housing. Some theoretical model of refugee housing was introduced only recently by me and my supervisor. And what we are trying to model. Our ultimate goal is to allocate refugees to available empty houses in some community, right? So we need to somehow capture how the community looks like and which houses are available, what are the housing options. To make this housing successful, we need to consider preferences of refugees, but also inhabitants, right? Because if any of these two sides is not satisfied with the housing, they can, for example, what refugees do, they just go into another city. And now the problem with redistribution we tried to resolve in previous phase is back at the beginning, right? Because they just usually move to some city with many other refugees. So we are back at the beginning. So how the model looks like. To model the community, we use a graph, a topology, where every vertex is some house, and two houses are connected by an edge if they can be considered neighboring. For example, they share an edge of properties. We have a set of inhabitants, the people already living in the city. They are living in some specific houses. So we have also assignment. But for every inhabitant, we basically know which house this inhabitant is owning or using. We have a set of refugees that we need to allocate to empty houses. Empty houses are, of course, houses not occupied by any inhabitants. And we have some preferences, inhabitants and of refugees. There is some notation by BI. We denote the set of houses occupied by inhabitants, and by BU, we denote the set of empty houses. As I said, the goal is to find housing, which is assignment to every refugee. We assign unique empty house, and we require that every agent is satisfied with its neighborhood. Now you maybe feel like this because there are plenty of things that are very not very well defined, right? So what are the preferences? What does it mean to be satisfied my neighborhood? In our initial paper, we studied 3 types of different preferences. The simplest model is called anonymous preferences. And under this model, refugees are indistinguishable, and only inhabitants have preferences. This is very basic starting model. What are now the preferences? So every inhabitant approves some number of refugees in its neighborhood. There is an example. So inhabitant H2 approves only 1 refugee in the neighborhood. Inhabitant H1 approves 0 or 2 refugees in the neighborhood. You can see that if H1 has only 1 refugee in the neighborhood, it's not approved. These are specific numbers of refugees they are approved. And satisfied means, what would you expect? That the number of refugees in my neighborhood is in this set I approve. So if we have 2 refugees and we house them like this, all our inhabitants are satisfied because H3 is neighbor of 1 refugee, H2 is also neighbor of 1 refugee, and H1 is neighbor of 2 refugees, and it's in their approval sets. As I said, refugees are indistinguishable. So if I swap these houses, this matching, then it's still fine because we care only about numbers in the neighborhood. It's nice, but refugees in this model don't have any voice. So there are no preferences of refugees, right? Which is something we wanted. And yes, that is basically it. It's the biggest problem with this model of preferences. So we also introduced something which is called hedonic preferences. And under these preferences, inhabitants as well as refugees approve some subsets of agents of the other type. So inhabitants approve some subsets of refugees, and refugees approve some subsets of inhabitants. Okay. Again, an example, H3 approves refugee R1 in its neighborhood, R2 in its neighborhood, but no, for example, both of them at the same time. H2 approves only refugee R2, and H1 approves only if all of the refugees are allocated to the neighborhood, which means both R1 and R2. And again, satisfied means that I approve my neighborhood. So if we house our refugees like this, we have R1 in the top vertex and R2 in the bottom vertex, then H3 is satisfied because he approves R1. H1 is neighbor of both R1 and R2, which is also approved, but H2 is not satisfied because H2 approves only R2. If we swap them, we are fine. Now we can capture also preferences of our refugees, but we need to have quite a lot of information, right? So these approval sets can be like exponential in the number of refugees, in the number of inhabitants, and we need to list all subsets we are. The third model we introduced is called diversity preferences, and it is somehow compromise between anonymous preferences and hedonic preferences. What is different here is that all agents, including refugees and inhabitants, are partitioned into K types. I use colors to distinguish different types. You can see that it can be the case that inhabitants and refugees are of the same type. So H1, H2, and R1 are of the same type, and H3 and R2 are of the same type. It is completely fine. Now, preferences are a little bit more tricky. So now our agents, both inhabitants and refugees, on this example, we consider that refugees are basically fine with everything, right, for the simplicity. So our agents approve some fractions of agents of each type in the neighborhood. So for example, this inhabitant H1 approves two possibilities. One is to have the whole neighborhood red, so all neighbors are red, or 2/3 of the neighborhood are red and 1/3 is blue. Right? And similarly for other inhabitants. We can again try to allocate somehow our refugees. And now we can see that for H3, this is not a good solution because this inhabitant requires half of the neighborhood to be red and half of the neighborhood to be blue, but the whole neighborhood is red, right? If we swap them, yeah, this is valid. What is different in diversity preferences compared to previous types of preferences is that now also other inhabitants are taken into consideration, right? Before, it was only about the other type of my agents. Now, I don't really distinguish between inhabitants and refugees. I just want to have some nice structure of my neighborhood. So what we do in our paper, we basically study conditions under which such nice housings are guaranteed to exist, and well, it turns out that it's very rare that such a housing exists. So what we do, we study computational complexity. So we study how hard it is to decide whether some good housing exists or not. And for graphs of maximum degree 2, which is paths and cycles, so very easy graphs, we can solve it in polynomial time, can decide this problem in polynomial time. But if we increase the degree of our graphs by 1 to maximum degree 3, it's already NP complete. All variants of this for all types of references, it's already computationally intractable to decide whether such housing exists. Not speaking about to finding an allocation housing. So what we do, we study some restrictions of the input that makes the problem tractable, and we use framework of parameterized complexity to reveal such tractable fractals. In parameterized complexity, we are interested in the running time of our algorithms, not only with respect to instance size, as in standard complexity. So NP complete basically means that under some standard theoretical assumptions, there is no polynomial time algorithm, right? Parameterized complexity is more finite. So we give running time of our algorithms not only with respect to instance size, but also some additional parameter, which is expected to be small for real-life instances. We can see from these two results that maximum degree is probably not very good parameter, right? Because already for constant size, which means already for maximum degree 3, it's intractable. So parameterization by maximum degree will not lead to a tractable algorithm. But what are natural parameters for this problem are number of refugees, right? So if number of refugees is very small, then we probably we may be able to find the solution quick. Number of inhabitants, if number of inhabitants and number of refugees is small, and we have some restrictions of the input graph that are different from maximum degree. These two parameters basically somehow restrict the family of graphs we are interested in. So what you can read from this table, even without knowing too much about parameterized complexity, is that FPT is good result. If there is NP hard, then it's very bad result. If there is double something hard plus XP, it's somewhat tractable. So XP algorithm is an algorithm that for constant value of this parameter is polynomial time. So if we have 5 refugees to have, we can decide our problems in polynomial time. If the number of refugees is somehow function of the input size, then we do not expect polynomial time algorithm. Unless something very strange happens in computational complexity in polynomial hierarchy. Okay. So we have some basic understanding of complexity of these problems. And now I would like to speak a little about future work. Not necessarily my future work, but something you all can work on if you are interested in this type of problems. So first of all, we consider only like perfect housing, right? Housing under which all agents are satisfied. This is very, very strict requirement. So one direction can be like try to relax this requirement. Also, there are in literature on computational social choice and AI and so on and so on. There are also other solution concepts like stability, fairness, proportionality, and many others. In one follow-up paper, we studied swap stability, which means that no pair of agents can improve by swapping their positions. Our previous analysis of computational complexity was very worst case focused. We studied only exact algorithms, and we were interested in worst case running time. So there is big space for employing some machine learning models, some operation research approach, also some randomized approach. And in this one paper, I studied a bit approximation algorithms. Long story short, approximation is also very hard in this problem. As you probably understand, so far the research is very, very theoretical, and it would be very nice to work with some real world data. But I'm not aware of any data set where such a preferences in any form basically would be available. It is also hard to, how should I ask people how many refugees they want in their neighborhood, right? It's a strange question to ask someone, and they may respond with very something not true. So maybe it turns out that we need different forms of preferences than those presented here. In one paper, I proposed some simpler model of preferences. So you notice that in the approvals that there can be gaps, right? So I can approve 0, I can approve 2, but I'm not forced to approve 1. So in this simple model of preferences, we just have an upper bound from every inhabitant. So the preferences are continuous, basically. Maybe closer to real life, but we needed to start somewhere. Fourth direction are dynamic models, because it is rarely the case that we have complete information, right? That all refugees arrive at the same time and we have all information from them. In practice, refugees arrive in online fashion, which means that some group arrive, then another group, and so on and so on. This is studied in refugee resettlement literature, for these refugees AI and so on. They consider dynamic arrival of refugees. We don't know, we didn't study how to do this in our. What is closest from so far work are these diversity preferences, because you can remember that it can be the case that an inhabitant and a refugee are of the same type, right? So it can somehow model that, okay, some refugees from previous wave of refugees, let's say, is already living in the city, and the newcomers want to live close to them, right? So this is closest of what we have closest to dynamic models. The biggest thing is to ask people that really works with refugees in the field, like non-government organizations and so on, so social workers and so on, what they need, right? Because without this input, we can play with our models, but they will never be any useful. So this is like the biggest task in this area. And that's all. Thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, please.
I had a question. Okay, so between the three types of functions, so the anonymous one, the hedonic one, and the diversity, did you prove any containments between them?
No.
Okay.
There is no containments.
Wouldn't I? Why not?
At least not like polynomial time containment.
Oh, yeah, that's fair. And you mentioned like different solution concepts.
Mm-hmm.
Does the hardness become easier if your bounds are upper bounds, for example, or like for anonymous preferences?
Yeah, so anonymous preferences with upper bounds are a little bit easier, but not that much.
Okay.
We have some algorithms for restricted graph classes, like vertex cover, which is not possible without this upper bound.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, it's as hard as the standard model.
Okay, and I'm not entirely sure what you mean by well, the fairness and proportionality parts that you mentioned in the different solution concepts.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't quite understand, because satisfying everyone's preferences.
Satisfying everyone's preferences is like perfect solution, right?
Right. And so this would be
fairness and proportionality are somehow weakening of this perfect solution.
So everyone's equally unhappy or unhappy to some threshold T.
Yes, exactly.
You see? Okay.
Any other questions? Yes?
My mind is brought back to internally displaced people versus refugees.
Mhm.
I'm sorry I missed the first half of your talk, so if I repeat something, please stop me. But I'm brought back.
I stopped you. I said we are not distinguishing between refugees and internally displaced
Oh,
persons.
perfect. Thank you. So I'm brought back to the homogeneity of the populace in specifically in World War II in Great Britain, when the bombing of London started happening, and how the expectation of medical professionals about trauma and psychological like harms coming to people, and the actual data was that people actually became more resilient in that time, and and people were living in subways, and people just kind of made it work. So I'm wondering if the stress of some type of external factor can help is a way to bound the problem to maybe address it with another variable. Because we're having the fires in California, and we're starting to see these things, and it's like if you bound the problem of what's causing the displacement, do you get different results?
It's very hard to say, right? First of all, we don't have much real data for this, and I think also this, like you said, this stress which makes them more resilient, it's not permanent. Right? It lasts only for some restricted period of time, and after this, people are just want save space and so on and so on. So it's like it can help in short term, but these things about resettlement and integration are usually very long term.
I wonder what you could mine from like historical memoirs and more qualitative research on it. Like or just personal accounts, because we do have lots of accounts of war throughout history, right? So and then that might get you some real world data.
Yes, but not really related to this particular, right? Maybe related to some resettlement, but maybe you don't need to I don't know, integrate the refugees if you expect them to return soon and so on and so on. But with housing, it's really long-term thing. You need to invest a lot of money, a lot of effort, and so on and so on. So I don't know whether this would be helpful, but I guess any data for refugee resettlement and so on and so on would be very valuable. Yes.
In this study, you are saying that the refugees do not have a choice, but the indigenous people, they have the preferences, right?
So it depends on our preferences, right? So in Anonymous, for sure, refugees don't have any voice, but in this hedonic diversity, they have some preferences. The same preferences basically as inhabitants. In diversity preferences, very the same preferences as inhabitants. In hedonic preferences, they have only preferences about the other side, right? About inhabitants, and inhabitants have preferences about refugees.
So do you think about the difficulty of the problem, like considering from left to right? Like either the first one is simpler than the middle one, the hedonic or the diversity. Is there any mathematical difference in difficulty of this one?
Yes, some restrictions that are hard in hedonic or diversity are actually easy in anonymous setting, but there is not a big difference between hedonic and diversity in terms of how complicated they are from the perspective of computational complexity, at least. We also have this table, right? So here, for example, for this parametric hedonic are very hard. Anonymous are somewhat easier. So yes, anonymous are easier, but also much more restricted compared to the others.
Right. So, I mean, you talked about various aspects of why, the first one being that it's computationally hard to, compute exact solutions with these models, the ones that you mentioned. But then you also mentioned that there are some deployed solutions, right? So then what restrictions do they drop in such deployed solutions? What metrics do they use to, choose out of multiple possible solutions? So like any comments on how those solutions actually work, the ones that you had, I think, included the logo for. So some idea on like what they actually do. This one and the one in the previous slide, I guess, in the one before the second. Yes, these ones.
Yeah. So I don't know much about these ones, so I will not talk about them. Yeah. First of all, this model is very different from ours.
Yeah.
It's some kind of machine market. So there are different machine learning approaches and operational research approaches which solve this not exactly, not precisely, but somehow approximate good solution. I think if you go and if you look at this video, it's very well explained what they do, how it works, and so.
Sorry, I had one more question. Could you go back to the slide with the table?
Yes.
There, I think when parameterized by the number of refugees, you show that the hedonic preferences are somehow easier than diversity?
Well, it's not easy, right? It's only hardness. It's not completeness.
Oh, okay. I see. Okay, because I was a little confused about why that would be.
Yeah.
So the question that the computational question that we're studying here is about deciding whether a good housing system.
Yes.
Can you say something about for problems which you have in FPT? What about the computing for the housing system?
All of our algorithms can actually compute, are constructive and can compute this housing if it exists.
Right. Are there any more questions? By any chance, somebody's thinking of something? Right. So I think this was a really insightful talk, Shimon. Thank you so much. Let's appreciate our speaker again. And of course, feel free to email Shimon or go through the papers and see if you want to collaborate or something. And then he's